Lips are like two raisins that have withered in the sun. Hey everybody, welcome back to my car and me driving my car. Any guess what day today is? If you said Tuesday, you would be correct. And what happens on Tuesday? It's time for another installment of my series that, oh God, what did we call it? Tuesday Talks on the Way to Therapy. What did I name it? This is where basically I am driving to therapy right now. So on the way, I figured we could talk about something either chronic illness related, don't hit me, or mental health related. Yeah, basically from those topics. So last week we talked about friendship and chronic illnesses and how that changes. And I've compared some observations that I've had and some other people have had to what it's like having friends react to a chronic illness versus friends react when somebody's diagnosed with cancer. I did a video about that. If you're interested in watching it, I'm gonna try to remember to link it below. If not, it's just a couple clicks away in my videos. All right, so I was trying to think, what do I want to talk about today? And I was thinking I would combine both mental health and chronic illness today for a video that it might not be relatable to everybody, but I know I can't be the only one who has dealt with this, and that is, how do you cope with a chronic illness when you have an eating disorder? Okay, so I used to have a very bad eating disorder. I consider an eating disorder an addiction, and that I will always have one. It's just its voice will be louder at some points than others. And right now I've worked so hard on recovery that I'm in a really good spot. And also me developing lupus has actually been a very weird component in my recovery, which I'll get into later. I can go more into my eating disorder in another video if anyone's interested, just let me know. But basically, I started getting sick when I was 13. I was not caught by my parents until I was 17 when I was diagnosed with anorexia. By the second semester of senior year of high school, I was basically taken out of all of my classes except for two. Chorus, which was my life, and I think English, because that was my other favorite thing in the world, was writing. I would go to school in the morning and then I would leave, and I would spend the second half of the day in an outpatient treatment center in Atlanta called the Atlanta Center for Eating Disorders. Eventually that just wasn't enough, so I was put inpatient at the Medical University of Charleston in South Carolina for several months. I honestly had no desire to get better whatsoever. I was forced to be there by my parents, but the only thing that kept me wanting to get out of that hospital was this whole singing competition, All-State Chorus in Georgia, that I had every year worked so hard to be able to do. And this was senior year, and it was my last opportunity, and it was literally like one of the only things that made me happy. And I was at the finalist stage, and so I had all this music to prepare, and I knew if I was in the hospital I couldn't go to that. So I kind of faked it to get out. And by fake it, I mean like I literally gained like 25 pounds in a couple of months, and I wasn't allowed to move. And so it was like very hard to, all of this is gonna make sense later, that's why I'm gonna go into all this now. But it was hard then. I couldn't move. I had no control over my body. I would get yelled at if I moved. To gain that much weight in a short amount of time without moving is like very traumatic for an anorexic especially. I'm not gonna go into the whole like psychology of why there are different kinds of treatment for eating disorders, but some I agree with and some I don't, and that one wasn't the most helpful. Their main concern was keeping me alive, not kind of the future of my recovery, if that makes sense. And also, I don't think, you know, this was a long time ago, so I think there's been a lot more advances have come on treatment and different treatment modalities and stuff. Long story short, that is why I didn't get better immediately. When I was growing up, there was no social media. It wasn't like you saw a ton of people with eating disorders. I know they existed around, but it was not like it was in your face kind of thing. So it could be a very isolating experience. Blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to as soon as All-State was done, all I wanted to do was lose weight again, but my body didn't want to. And I went through this vicious cycle for like several years of restricting like crazy and binging, and I became bulimic. That was something that I had always not done before because I sang, but it got to the point where when your disorder's bad enough, the things that are important to you just kind of fly out the window, and I just became desperate, and I was bulimic, and I'm not going to go into the details about that. It could be its own video, but I was in an eating disorder support group in college. I ended up having to go to the hospital again. I went to DePaul Tulane in New Orleans for the summer of one of my years of college. That time I was focusing on my bulimia. I wasn't in a place to go. It didn't really help me. Mentally, I just wasn't ready. I left there, I came back home, I think I lost a bunch of weight. And toward the end of college, it was more of me restricting. And it was kind of I guess it was a mixture of both. And then, long story short, my dad ended up dying, and he had sacrificed so much for me to get better. When my dad died, I realized if I don't start trying to figure out how to get better, I will literally die. Like, I've been doing this for so many years now. I have no life. Like, it is literally this eating disorder. I ended up moving to LA. It was like the first time I'd ever made a decision for myself, and it was very illogical for me to do, but I did it, and it saved my life. I had to learn how to recover. There were a lot of periods of relapses, but those periods got longer and longer and longer until now. It's been a very long time since I've relapsed. I don't actively try to control things with food anymore. And it was hard because I had to learn how to feel things, because if you are numbing yourself for that long, you don't feel emotions. And then once you take away that coping mechanism, all you do is feel, and it's like a harsh, raw way to feel, because you don't know how to handle those emotions without using a disorder to aid you. And so I had to really learn how to regulate my anger and the sadness and happiness and everything. Like, I was very all over the place for a while. That's normal. And then I was doing really, really well, and my metabolism kicked back in. It was such a relief to me just to finally have listened to everyone for years who was saying, you just have to get over this hurdle. Your metabolism's going to slow down for a bit, but you just have to be uncomfortable for a while, sit through it, and then it'll speed up and you'll be fine. And that was true. It happened for me. And I was doing great. And then I developed lupus. When I got sick, I started having a lot of mobility issues, which made it very, very hard for me to move. It eventually I spent the majority of my time in bed. When I did walk, it was with a cane or a walker. This was for months and months and months and months. And I never changed my eating habits, because that was the one thing I told myself was, I have to be so careful right now not to relapse with my eating disorder, because I have zero control over my body right now, which is the most terrifying thing in the world if you have an eating disorder, to have zero control over your body, because that's all you want is control. Like, that's your way of finding, you know, kind of your peace in the world, by controlling your body and controlling your intake. And even though I was really trying not to act my eating disorder behaviors, when I lost complete control over my body, it's instinctual to want to do whatever you can do to gain that control back. And so I had to actively be like, you can't relapse, because I know myself and I know how hard it was for me to get to where I was in recovery. Like, it was so hard. Like, I was honestly at a point in my eating disorder where I didn't know if it was possible for me to recover. Like, I had really gone off that cliff, but I did. And so I focused a lot of energy of the beginning of me getting sick with lupus on not relapsing with my eating disorder. That being said, not moving for that amount of time and not changing your eating habits. And when I say not changing my eating habits, I was already, like, I wasn't overeating or anything. There was nothing to change. I was eating a healthy amount of food. I think if I had ate less, it would have been too little, if that makes sense, because I already was at a normal caloric intake for my height and weight and stuff. And so I think if I were to like restrict my calories, it would just hurt my metabolism, even though I wasn't moving. But regardless, I gained like 15 pounds and like over a series of months. It was slow. It wasn't immediate like the first time when I was in the hospital with anorexia. It wasn't that immediate, but it was enough that, you know, it made me feel very foreign in my body, and I was already feeling super foreign in my body, and it was hard, and I didn't feel like I could wear normal clothes. I just didn't feel like myself. one of the things before I got sick with lupus, with my eating disorder recovery, is I made it a point where if I ever had a day where I felt really fat, instead of hiding in sweats and oversized clothes, I would make myself wear a long dress, like a long maxi dress or something, to feel feminine, because I realized that made me feel better, and I couldn't see my body. It distracted me from that, whatever was making me feel fat, because fat is the feeling of fat is a feeling. It's something is telling you something you're not dealing with. And so I would always wear like long dresses and stuff. So I started trying to do that again to make me feel at least better, but it was just hard. Oh, that was it. So I needed control over my body so bad that I pierced my ear, and then that didn't do enough. So I ended up dyeing my hair hot pink. I had great hair. I loved my hair prior to dyeing it hot pink. Like, I had long, beautiful brown hair. I'd say it was one of my better assets because I liked it. But I dyed it hot pink, and I don't regret it. It ruined it. It ruined my hair. It started breaking off in a bunch of places because they had to bleach it so much to be able to retain the pink. It was good to have that outlet for several months of, this is my way of controlling my body in a healthy way that is not going to damage me, because the last thing I need with a chronic illness is to hurt my body that is already hurting itself. I have an autoimmune disease, which means my immune system is attacking my body. So if I were to continue hurting my body on top of that, how is that benefiting me at all? I was already fighting so hard to survive. I didn't want to make that more difficult for myself. And it was a big learning lesson. I had to learn how to have a completely different relationship with food, because I realized that although I was eating normally for me, and I wasn't actively restricting, a lot of what I was doing was consuming enough calories for the sake of calories. It was less about nutrition. I've always been a very healthy person, so I was getting good nutrition, but it wasn't amazing, and there was no purpose behind it. The purpose behind me eating was always just to stay full. It just changed. When I got sick, it was more of, okay, I have to change what I put in my body now, because everything I eat is going to affect me. And I learned how things that were eating were affecting me. I gave up dairy because I had heard that it could really not cure by any means, but help with some of the symptoms of lupus and other autoimmune diseases. So I did that. Everyone also told me you really should try going gluten-free. And that scared me, because when you're vegan, it takes away a lot of food options that you can eat. And then I thought, if I add gluten-free on top of that, that's really restricting it. And I'm already trying not to relapse with my eating disorder. Can I handle this without it tricking me into having my eating disorder relapse? And then I realized it too late. So I had to be very mindful. But my symptoms were so bad, I was at a point where I was like, you know what, I'm willing to try anything. So I did go gluten-free, and within a couple of months, it made the difference of me having to use my cane every day. And I did learn how to figure out a way to accept it without me using it as a game or a way to manipulate not having to eat certain things. It was just, no, this is what I have to do to take care of my body. It was like the first time I had ever, that first year of getting sick, or second year of getting sick, when I was like really altering my diet, it was just the first time I'd really actually taken care of my body for the sake of, let's figure out what works for you in a healthy way, not in a desperately, how can we eat a certain amount of calories so you don't gain weight and you maintain a weight, but you don't have active eating disorder symptoms. It was like this whole thing I was doing. And this time it was like all semblance of control had been stripped from me, and I had to figure it out. And I'm proud of myself because I did. But it's still hard. It's hard for me to be active. My body is very different looking than it was before. I still eat the same, and I still have a very different body than I did a few years ago. And yes, I know I'm not fat. Yes, I know that my body is fine. But you have to realize, when you have a body that, you know, or something that your body looks a certain way, and then it changes, because you can't control it, it is something you have to process and work through, because I was losing my identity. I literally had lost everything in my life. My friends, I lost my job, I lost my ability just to take care of anything. And so to lose my appearance that I had had before on top of that was really, I was literally losing everything, and I had to start over and figure out, who am I? And that's what I'm still trying to do. But